So one of the consequences of perfection, which I've really realized, is that it's one of the things that holds women back from applying for or pursuing higher positions, because they often don't feel that they are ready, because they know they couldn't do the new job perfectly from day one. This is something I know that baffles a lot of men. Why would she? I invited her to apply for this position. It's a better position. She doesn't have little kids at home, so that's not it. It's a better position. And she said, I'm still learning in the job I have. And so I don't want to make that move. And it's often that perfectionism. We feel like we have to be able to do everything pretty perfectly.
Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm so happy and so honored to have Sally Helgesen here with us today. Sally is cited in Forbes as the world's premier expert on women's leadership. She is an internationally best-selling author, speaker, and leadership coach. She's been inducted into the Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame, which honors those whose ideas have shaped the field of leadership worldwide. And let me pause there for a moment. Congratulations, Sally. I know that's a huge honor.
Thank you.
Some other honors. Sally's been ranked #1 in leadership by Global Gurus and has been recognized with the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Institute of Management Studies. Sally's incredible book, How Women Rise, co-authored by Marshall Goldsmith, examines the behaviors most likely to get in the way of successful women. Rights have been sold in 26 languages, and it's recently been named Inc. magazine's #1 book CEOs and founders want to give to every woman in their company. And I highly recommend that you do. It's no surprise to me, Sally. I mentioned to you in the conversation before we clicked record that I have shared this with so many people in my literally dozens of copies of your book with people in my circles after I read it, because I truly believe it's a must read. Sally's previous books include The Female Advantage, Women's Ways of Leadership, hailed as the classic in its field and continuously in print since 1990, and The Female Vision, Women's Real Power at Work, which explores how women's strategic insights can strengthen their careers. The Web of Inclusion and New Architecture for Building Great Organizations was cited in the Wall Street Journal as one of the best books on leadership of all times, and is credited with bringing the language of inclusion into business. Sally's most recent book, Rising Together, How We Can Bridge Divides and Create a More Inclusive Workplace, published in 2023, topped Amazon's list for workplace and culture in the first week and has found a global audience. Her excellent newsletter, which I subscribe to and highly recommend that our listeners do as well, All Rise, is published weekly on Substack. And welcome, Sally. I, with all my heart, am so grateful for the work that you do, and of course for your willingness to come on the show and share even a tiny little bit of all that wisdom with our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, Barrett. It's wonderful to be here with you.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. What led you to, I imagine, have obviously a passion, an interest, a curiosity about inclusion and specifically about women and leadership?
My interest in women's leadership came from my own experience. In the 1980s, I was working as a speechwriter in corporate communications for a number of major global corporations. And I worked for excellent companies, but I was vividly aware, we're talking about mid-80s here, that they had no idea of the kind of ideas and strategic understanding that the women in the organizations could be contributing. Women were more accepted than in these companies because they were really outstanding, but not in terms of their ideas. And I would often hear, I felt like better ideas exchanged in the ladies' lounge, as it was then called, at the workplace than I would hear in the meetings I was in. And I thought there's got to be a way to get some of this in. So I decided that the best way to address it was to explore what women who did hold real leadership, real influential leadership positions in organizations, what their contributions were, that might have an influence on organizational culture at that time. So that book became The Female Advantage, which I'm proud to say was the first book that looked at what women had to contribute as leaders rather than how they needed to change and adapt, which is what both uh, academic books and popular books were focused on. And, all the advice columns, everything was, the wear a bow tie, if it moves, salute it. You're in the army now. You're not going to change things. And I thought, things are changing rapidly. The technology was really evolving. And this is bad advice. So I want to highlight women who do believe that they have something extra to contribute. So as a result of that book, which became very popular and was written about a lot, again, it had the advantage of being first. I started speaking and coming into organizations. They would ask me to come in and give advice to their women, to their men about the women. So I thought, well, this is more interesting than writing speeches for executives who often turn their back on the audience and stare at, what you've written. So I decided to go with that. It was a big risk. My family thought I was nuts, but I was able to build it and write more, 8 more books and lots of articles and turn it into something.
Yeah, and that something is a big ripple effect in the world. And again, on behalf of all women and men, I thank you for this work. So, what are some of the key habits, if we were to get into the book How Women Rise, that are holding women from getting to that next level of success?
Well, the one that I find globally to be the most resonant, and I can tell you this book has been published in 26 languages, and I have spoken in 36 countries about it. So it really does have this, it speaks to some commonality in some of the things that keep women, if you will, stuck. And they're not as different as we might think across culture. But the one that maybe it's really two that over and over and over come up. I often survey groups I'm going to speak to, here are the 12 habits, here's a description, run this poll out and let me know which ones are the biggest issues for your women. And I've never done that when reluctance to claim your achievements and expecting others to spontaneously notice and value your contributions aren't in the top 3 and are usually the top 1. I put those 2 habits together because it's cause and effect. Your reluctance to claim it, so you kind of outsource it to other people, hoping they'll notice or expecting they'll notice, doesn't happen, and you feel bad and start to disconnect. So that's pretty consistent all over the world.
Thank you for sharing that. And I sense that um, uh, habit of underselling themselves, if I can call it that, is rooted in some deeper beliefs, some deeper mindsets. What do you think is leading to that behavior of not speaking up, not selling themselves enough, or in a congruent, authentic way?
The belief that it's inappropriate, the fear of being perceived as arrogant, as all about me, or as undercutting your team. I hear that all the time. How can I speak about myself? But, we're supposed to be working as part of a team. And if I speak about myself, I'm undercutting my team. Or I've had a lot of pushback that I seem arrogant or self-involved. If I try to share what my contributions are, how can I do that in a way that I won't get that pushback? You cannot guarantee you won't get that pushback from somebody. That's not going to happen, probably. There's going to be somebody who's uncomfortable with women speaking up like that. Maybe they think, boy, I don't want my wife speaking to me like that. It's not, you're doing what you need to do, not just to bring attention to yourself, but to let people know what you're contributing. That's really important. So, one of the things I always advise for women is to use the language of contribution rather than achievement. It tends to be, this is not in the book, but it tends to be more comfortable for women to talk about, I contributed this. And, one of the reasons I think we'll be successful is my contribution. I'm able to make contributions in this particular way. And it gives you a way around the team conundrum, because you can always say, our team achieved incredible results. We met this benchmark. Here was the financials. Here was the client response. Our team did a great job. This was my contribution. You need to say that, and that's where women will often stop. And I've witnessed conversations where an executive is saying, "But what did you do?" Well, the team did this. It becomes a habit. So it's one thing men can be aware of and hold women to account. I asked what you did. You're part of the team. What did you do? I need to know that information. It's helpful to me.
And I imagine it's also important for women, of course, to take the responsibility, the ownership of expressing what they do on a regular basis, not just when there's like a big achievement and, this is my piece of it, in the sense that when there's awareness of that, then there can be an appreciation of that. There can also be opportunities for growth, right? Where people can say, okay, I didn't realize that you spent 3 hours on this project, or that you went out and interviewed all these people, and that you took this risk, right? Let's say, to get this result. And, first of all, there's an appreciation for the effort and a recognition. In addition to that, they can open more opportunities for them, knowing that they are risk takers, that they are willing to go out of their comfort zone. I imagine new options, new doors might open for them.
Of course, of course. And then if they don't do that, and then somebody else gets promoted who they feel didn't do what they did, they didn't make as great a contribution as they did, then they feel bad about it, or feel, they may just take it personally. Oh, I struggle here, or they may get mad. Oh, this organization privileges men. Well, if they're speaking up and you're not, of course they're going to be privileged. So it is important to take responsibility for that, exactly what you say, and examine what is holding you back. What is the biggest fear? Well, somebody might think I am, arrogant. Okay, someone might think you're arrogant. The other thing that I think is problematic here, often women will say, "Well, I'm just not comfortable talking about that." Of course you're not, because you don't do it. We don't get comfortable doing something unless we do it. We know that. We understand that. We can't get comfortable about it, thinking about it, or coming up with a new idea about how we could do it, but then not doing it. So it requires taking that risk, and respecting yourself for taking that risk, and understanding there might be times it doesn't exactly work out, but you're getting used to it, you're learning, you're getting comfortable.
And I so appreciate that you brought that up, that parts of us naturally will not feel comfortable to do something we're not familiar or habitually doing. That's just the response of the body, these protective unconscious systems that are doing their very best to keep us safe. Because anything that's new or different presents a certain level of risk, of course, for the body, because we don't exactly know how it's going to play out. And so what I think is really important that you're saying here is that pause of saying, okay, this is what I need to do, right? Especially after people read your book, they're more conscious of the habits, right? And then they're therefore more conscious of what they need to do to overcome, or, shift that pattern, to be able to, first of all, accept where they are, right? Realize that where they are is, something that is worthy of recognition and acceptance. Because oftentimes people can compare themselves to others who maybe are further along in the curve or whatever, right? So to first accept where they are and to accept the different parts of themselves. So it's like a
Mhm.
paradox, right? So it's like one part of me is confident and wants to speak up. Another part of me may believe I need to be humble, right? Or I may make somebody uncomfortable or make myself uncomfortable, right? So that pause of accepting these different parts of ourselves and understanding why they're there often helps to soften some of the resistance to doing the very thing we need to do to break through.
It's such an important point and I know this from becoming a public speaker. I mean, when I got calls after the Female Advantage came out, I'd never given a speech in my life except when I was in high school. And it was I felt really awkward. And when it started to get better for me was when I said, you know what? I feel really awkward. Okay, haven't done it much and I feel awkward. So what? Big deal. Who cares? I feel awkward. And then I think when you get comfortable with that, then people they identify with their own times they've felt awkward. So they feel better disposed to you rather than when you're trying to cover it up and saying, I have got to do a great job. Oh, I blew it that time. And then you castigate yourself and ruminate and all that sort of business. So it really is that taking a breath. There's one other thing that I think is so important to this. And this goes to Marshall Goldsmith's big message, which is you can't do it alone. So you're going into a meeting, you're going to speak. You feel uncomfortable speaking in this meeting. That's been your experience. Enlist someone before. I'm going to speak in this meeting. I felt very uncomfortable in it before. Would you just watch me and see how I'm doing and give me any feedback? Is that what you're seeing? Is it working? Is there something that you think I could do? Or you can go to somebody who's very good at doing this. I really admire the way you speak up in meetings. I'm trying to get better at it. I feel uncomfortable when I do it, and I'm not sure I'm doing a good job. Is there anything you do to prepare that could be helpful for me? So this is very powerful way of doing it. And I especially recommend when it's women asking a man to put his eyes on you because he's, more likely to say, I think that, you went on too long here, or, you could have cut it there, or we didn't need to hear about X, but you did a really good job. I think that we sometimes are likely to get more direct feedback from men because women will be, I really want to support you. You're wonderful, etc. So it's very good to have eyes on what you're doing. And then you are more likely actually to speak up rather than just, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it today. I'll do it in the next meeting because you've told somebody you're doing it and you feel like you have a responsibility to them because you asked them. So it's a very helpful and important technique, I believe.
Oh, I think it's very wise. I'm so grateful that you shared it because there's so many benefits. I mean, number one, the individual who's looking at you, if you will, observing, giving you feed forward, is aware of your growth mindset that you want to get better, that you want to improve.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's a feeling of I'm not alone, right? Somebody's here to help me. Somebody's got my back. They've agreed to help me. And that also is comforting, right? Because I know that should I stumble and fall, someone's going to help me to get better. I'm not going to get stuck on the ground, right? Someone's going to give me what I need to at least take one step and improve and get better. It's a great, relatively simple strategy to do, and it takes courage. If we
Yes.
haven't asked for help before, if we're the kind of person, woman or man for that matter, that's like I need to do this on my own. There's almost like a shame in asking for help. How do we overcome that?
I think that we think about times people have asked us for help. And we think that it was shameful for them to ask it. It's also the other thing is it's flattering to people. especially the thing of, I think you're really good at this. Do you have any tips for me? Who's going to say, how dare you ask that? I mean, really, it's ridiculous. You're showing that you're eager to enlist this person as an ally, that you're thinking of them as an ally, as someone who can and will and is open to helping you. And people don't reject that. So if you can put that in that frame of, this is me enlisting an ally to help me in my own self-development, that's a pretty positive frame rather than, oh, well, this person's busy and they may not want to help me, and who am I to, and all that kind of silly stuff that gets in the way. It's just like in sports, a team can't flourish unless the teammates are kind of coming to one another's rescue when a play is going wrong, and it's not a shameful thing. So I think that's really important, is to just put it in the context. How would you feel if somebody asked for your support? And then really, I'm enlisting this person as an ally. It is a great way of extending your network and becoming more visible. And as you said in the first point with the mindset, the growth mindset, showing you have a growth mindset, it's advertising that you're open to change and working to change. And that's good, because then people are more likely to notice.
Absolutely. And that comes again with the responsibility of then enlisting them when there is an opportunity to give their advice and to follow through on their, advice, to improve, and that continuous conversation. It's not a one-time thing. I'm
Right. Exactly. And you're saying, I'd love to follow up with you, and make sure two things: that the request is very brief and very specific. You don't want to say, would you just tell me how I did? No, I'm working on this. I'd love your feedback on that specifically. So you're not giving them the idea that, this is going to be a big deal. It's just a one-time quick thing that would be helpful to you. And then they're more likely to say yes. And guess what? If they say no, don't take it like, oh, they turned me down. Fine. Ask someone else immediately. Maybe they felt that they had no help to give you, or you don't know what's going on with them. Maybe their husband or wife left them that morning and they just don't, they want to focus on that. So you don't know what's happening in people's lives.
And just one last quick point on this, in case it's helpful. Dr. Cialdini, Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence, one of the principles of influence is unity, right? That sense of inclusion, that sense of we-ness. And one of the tips to create that sense of, having an ally, right? That partnership, that unity, is to ask for advice, and specifically that word. So not like feedback, input. What he found in his research is the word advice really helps people see themselves as not so much as critics or just observers, rather as partners, as you said, as allies. And that can bring even more of that sense of unity into the culture of the team and the organization.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's very, very helpful to me in the work that I do, that word advice and the power of it. I'd kind of forgotten that in that book about, enlisting help and how good the word advice is. I personally have problems with the word feedback. And, feed forward, I guess, is an alternative. It's certainly better. But, when someone says to you, can I offer you some feedback? You don't think like, oh, great, I'm getting feedback. You think, how dare you? Or, no, or I can't handle it right now. Most of us feel that way. So I think the word advice, I try to keep language as simple as possible in organizations and as universal as possible. And advice is the kind of thing that we ask for all the time outside of work, but asking for feedback is kind of specific to biz speak. So I love advice. Thanks.
Of course. And so thank you for sharing a couple of these habits. So, are there any others from the 12 that are really important for our listeners to be very mindful of?
Yes, I think that one of the consequences of the perfection trap, which is, very common, and can be particularly toxic as we move forward to a higher level. So this is something that really does, because it's hard to delegate work because it's got to be done perfectly. So you're doing it yourself, and you create more stress when you're a perfectionist if you have a lot of authority than if you're just a person working at your desk and your job isn't as influential. So, one of the consequences of perfection, which I've really realized, is that it's one of the things that holds women back from applying for or pursuing higher positions because they often don't feel that they are ready because they know they couldn't do the new job perfectly from day one. So this is something I know that baffles a lot of men. Why would she? I invited her to apply for this position. It's a better position. She doesn't have little kids at home, so that's not it. It's a better position. And she said, I'm still learning in the job I have. And so I don't want to make that move. And it's often that perfectionism. We feel like we have to be able to do everything pretty perfectly. This operates, I became aware of this with How Women Rise about a year after it was published when I did a program at a big healthcare company. And one of the questions I got was, if a internal posting says that 6 things are required for the job they're posting about, then how many do I need in order to apply? Is it 5? Is it all 6? Is it 4? I mean, this is a ridiculous question, and I'm standing up there on stage. I can't answer it. The fellow who was the Women's Network champion, who was a relatively young guy who had a huge position in the company, raised his hand and he said, "Let me answer that." He said, "The job I had before this, I really wanted because I thought that it might lead to the job I have now." So when it was posted, I looked at the he said there were 6 qualifications. I had 2. And I realized that all I needed to do was to figure out how I could best talk about why I could get up to speed quickly on those other 4. He said, I did a good job with that. I got the job and it led me here. And the women in the gasp that he had applied for a job with 6 qualifications when he had 2 was extraordinary. And the first impulse was, well, that wouldn't work for a woman. Well, who knows? Test it out, try it. But he understood that the job was not being able to do a job he'd never done perfectly on day one. It was to identify why he could learn to do that job. Not on day one, but with a learning curve. Every job has a learning curve. So it's pretty common. And I can give you 10 examples of it being common at the highest levels, corporate, military, and association. But I think that's a very helpful thing for men to understand. The guy was floored at this healthcare company. Are you kidding? And it's very, very helpful. And it's a good thing for women to understand, no, that's not your task to wait until you can do all 6 things, to wait until you're 100% qualified for a job you haven't had.
So what do you think that habit is really about? What do you think that parts of them are afraid of should they pursue something they're not yet fully ready for?
I think some of it comes from having had experiences where they've gotten pushback earlier in their career, or that someone has told them, you're not really ready to do this job, or you only got here because you're a woman, or, in some way, I mean, African Americans in the United States and people from, other cultures often go through this, oh, you only got the job because you're X, Y, and Z. And so the desire to just prove that we are ready for the job, makes, I interviewed a woman who became the only superintendent of a major service academy in the United States, the U.S. Coast Guard. And she had this. She said, I got so much flack when I was commanding an icebreaker, which is a tough job. She said from the guys and from my commander, et cetera, I got so much flack that it undermined my confidence. So when I was called in for this huge promotion to be chief of staff to the Secretary of Transportation, I said, no, I just got here. I'm loving this job. I'm still learning it. I've got to give it a pass. Now, her commander was very smart because he listened to her. He didn't say anything. And he called her the next morning and he said, let me rephrase my question from yesterday. When will you be willing to meet with the Secretary of Transportation? When do you have it in your schedule? I've got his appointments chief on the line right now, and I need to tell him. In other words, you don't have a choice here. And it was a brilliant move on his part. And it turned out to be a great benefit for the Secretary of Transportation and ultimately for her entire service branch.
Thank you for that story. And it just illustrates how important it is, not only, of course, for us to believe in ourselves,
Yes.
when we're not in that place yet, when we're fully aligned in that belief, to have the people around us, uh, you know, be that voice for us, hold that space for us, believe in us, even when we don't yet believe fully in ourselves. We can stand on our own 2 feet and ask for advice, and people are willing to give it when they trust that we're going to honor their advice and to take action on that advice. And that's why the follow through is so critical.
That is exactly why. If you're not prepared to follow through, just wait until you are, because if you don't follow through, then it will really undermine you to be someone who's asking for advice and then not taking it. Now, you're not required to take all the advice you get. You may judge that it doesn't work for the situation, but you have to come back to that person and say, the thing that you told me that was really helpful was X. And when I did it, this is what happened. So I want to thank you for that. You have to at least be committed to doing that. You can't just like go around gathering advice and then not act on it.
Yeah. And so again, there's this like paradoxical mindset. So for example, let's take your point earlier around the reluctance to speak and kind of, underselling ourselves. So if you look at the continuum, right? So on the one hand is not speaking up enough.
Hmm.
And on the opposite might be that arrogance. It might be really like overselling when two is obviously operating out of some fear, right? But we're overdoing it, right? Maybe other people are like, she's too much, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at that as a continuum, that there's a paradox there, right? Because there are times to be a little bit more on the side of selling, and times maybe when it is more appropriate to maybe give the team more of a voice and maybe take a little bit of a step back, right? So it's very nuanced. So how do we know when one of our strengths, like let's say perfectionism, in the sense of it got us to a certain level, right?
Of
We
course it did.
work
Yeah.
and people saw it and promoted us and so on. How do we know when it's crossing the fence to like an over attachment, which can limit us?
I think we know from the responses we're getting. When we're creating, say, let's take perfectionism. Perfectionism creates stress. It creates stress for us and it creates stress for other people. So if we look around and we see the people, and we're leading a team, and we see the people on the team are stressed out, and we have to watch them and look at them and listen to them to understand that, then we have to take that on ourselves. We have to say, my team is stressed out. I'm noticing that. What am I doing to stress them out. So it's the kind of self-awareness. And again, we may think, I can't think of anything I'm doing. Why? Because we're used to operating in that way. So again, it's a good time to say to someone from the outside, because your team members aren't going to say, yeah, you're really difficult to work with. But you can ask someone from the outside and say, I'm having this issue. Do you think this was an unreasonable request? Do you think I'm piling too much on? Is there some training I should be doing? Is there, what can I do to begin to alleviate this situation, which I believe, since I'm the team leader, I need to take responsibility for? If we're not a team leader, if we're junior on the team, then we're not creating that kind of stress. And our perfectionism is probably also serving us because we're reliable. The other way you can tell, and again, I'm using perfectionism because I think that there's something different with each of them when we know that they're becoming problematic. But with perfectionism, if we find ourselves doing other people's work because we figure they can't do it as well as I can do it, and then we're exhausting ourselves in that process, then we're pretty poor at delegation and at holding people to account, and we need to look at the role that perfectionism may be playing in that. And I'm not, perfectionism is one of the hardest habits here to address because it's almost becomes characterological, but it is not. We can practice letting go. And I don't think just taking a breath and saying, let it go, is that effective. I think what is effective is first of all, being honest about how it's going. I'm realizing the team is feeling a bit stressed and I'm looking at my own role in it. And so if I really want to hear from you when things feel like they're getting to be too intense. That would be a very helpful thing to me. You can also create experiences for yourself of doing things where there is no way you can be perfect, that are a little bit low risk. I mean, for myself, doing some tech, saying, I'll take care of the group chat on that. I mean, I'm so bad with technology. It's ridiculous. But, if I say that, I'll take care of the group chat, then it's a small risk. I'm not doing it for a client. I'm doing it for, a group of friends. It's easy to ask for help. I have a learning curve. And I'm already set up knowing that I'm going to be bad at it. And it's really helpful to have experiences of doing stuff that you're bad at because it makes you less risk averse.
Yeah. And it tells these protective parts of you, you'll survive.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And you're not alone,
yeah.
right? Maybe you were when you were 2 years old when something happened and you failed and you're not you're not alone anymore. And you've got support and you can ask for what you need and you can uh, accept that you're doing your very best with the tools that you have, with the resources and the environment system you're in. I think that the ability to go inward as well as outward, right? So everything that you share, I think, is absolutely important in terms of asking people to notice these habits, right? Because we have our own blind spots, right? We can't see what we can't see in terms of stretching out of our comfort zone. And at the same time, we need to go inward and say, all right, little part that's scared right now to take care of the chat because you've never done it before and you're not, you think you're not good with technology. What are you really scared of? And I'm willing to bet that that part will tell us, oh, I'm scared to fail, or I'm scared I won't belong, or that, I'll feel shame, or,
Yeah.
and oftentimes just the ability to do that softens some of that attachment. It's easier to let go when these
Yeah.
parts of us know that we're listening and that we're not alone anymore.
And things will come up, like with the technology. I know what I fear. I fear I'll look like I'm old. You
Oh,
I That's what the fear is, like, oh, okay, well, that's typical from someone her age. Okay, fine. It's, am I ashamed of my age? Am I ashamed that I acquired all these other talents and skills along the way? No. This is something, a combination of my experience of the world and just my interests are making me feel embarrassed.
Yeah, and it's the human experience to have thoughts like that. Like, for example, people might perceive me as too old. I remember years ago, I worked at an outplacement firm. So, Sally, I worked with, hundreds of people that were laid off and were given a program. Yeah, so I would help them to transition to their next job. And the difference between those people, men and women, that landed relatively quickly and those that truly were stuck is mindset. They all had access to the same resources, how to write a resume, how to do your LinkedIn profile, what to say in a networking conversation, right? All those things. It wasn't strategy, it wasn't information. It was mindset.
Mhm.
Those ones that believed I can't do it, I haven't done it before, I'm not good enough, right? That whole like perfectionism aspect to it. I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too those limiting beliefs are oftentimes what limited them from doing the things they knew they needed to do.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's why I think that the first thing you brought up, which is taking that moment to go inward, to ask yourself, what's my fear here? Why am I uncomfortable? I am uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to have fear around this. It's not a big deal. It's just, I'm a human being. I'm not, a perfection machine. David White has this great, fully actualized California hot tub perfect person. And nothing against California or hot tubs, both of which I love. But it kind of gets to it, this idea that we've got to, make the most of ourselves at every second and be the best person we can be at every moment. It's rewarding to be the best person you can be. It's rewarding to reach your full potential, but it's not a requirement on a full-time basis at all.
Sally, and that pressure is just getting
Mm.
bigger and bigger, heavier and heavier, that load. And there's so much depression and anxiety and overwhelm out there because of these stories. And especially now with AI and competition, it's just getting harder. And this is why I'm so grateful that you wrote this book, that you're doing the work that you're doing, including the work on inclusion, because the more that we are united, um, the more both on the internal, right? All of the parts of us, that
Yeah.
paradoxical mindset, right? I accept that I'm scared and that I want to move forward, right? I accept all the parts of myself as they are, right? And the acceptance of others is such a critical part to our ability to overcome some of these personal cultural mindsets that are holding our whole planet back and can pose a great risk with where we're headed. And, because when we are together, that resonance allows all of our parts to know we're not alone. There is safety, right? There's safety in us together, and we can trust somebody's got our back, which makes it easier to take risks, easier to innovate, easier to do things, and also easier to not do things in the sense of if I don't push myself, to a breaking point and burn myself out, I'm still loved, I'm still accepted, I'm still
Yeah.
okay. So as we complete here, how can people learn even more about your books, your wonderful keynotes?
My website, Sally at Sally Helgesen, sallyhelgesen.com. It's got lots of information, topic descriptions, the whole bit. And of course, the link to Substack, and there's a contact button for me. I do post on LinkedIn. I'm not as good with social media as I should be, although I do love doing things on Substack. So I'm easy to get in touch with. Sally at sallyhelgesen.com. So make it happen.
Well, once again, Sally, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your pioneering work in our world. It is making a difference.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Hey, Game Changers. I hope you loved this episode with Sally Helgesen on How Women Rise. This is an excellent book. I bought it for my clients, both men and women, and I highly recommend it. If you have not yet read the original from Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, I recommend that as well. It's really eye-opening to recognize our own patterns and how the things that helped us to succeed and get to the point where we are in life and at work may not be what we need to get to that next level. So I hope you enjoy those. If you want to learn even more on how to change, how to shift some of those patterns, really the biology of change, I invite you to tune in to episode 145 with Susan Britton. I think you will enjoy that as well. So all my love, if you haven't subscribed, please do so, and download the Momentum Institute app. You'll get access to some excellent free resources that can help you to adapt and be your best self. Bye for now.